So, we know the story from here. His other hero, actually, was Charles Lyell, and I'm sure Dick Neal told you last year that Charles Lyell had a huge influence on Darwin, in a different kind of influence. I don't think Charles Darwin had met Lyell at the time, okay? But just before Charles was going on the Beagle, the ship HMS Beagle, the first volume of this great book, it says in 2 volumes, but I think there were 3 in the end. Lyell didn't realize he was going to write a 3rd one. The Principles of Geology was published, and Darwin was one of the books he took with him on the Beagle, on the voyage of the Beagle. And then when he was in La Plata, he got volume 2 sent to him. And volume 3, I can't remember if he got that later or got it when he came back to Britain at the end of the voyage. But this book was a very important reference book for Charles Darwin, because Charles Darwin, when he went on the Beagle, he went as the ship's naturalist, but he was really thinking scientifically like a geologist.
What is this?
Okay.
There's another one there.
Okay, well, so he was 22 years old when he joined the Beagle. And I told my paleo class today, paleontology class, I said, he was the same age as you guys, most of them. Can you imagine being saddled with the responsibility of being the ship's an expedition naturalist? I don't think even we realize what an honor and a chance that was for Darwin. I was just reading a book last night about something else. It had to do with the expansion of the British Empire in the 1800s. But for Darwin to get on this ship, this wasn't like, hey, I just walked in and, can I have a job? And it wasn't like that at all. This was an absolute fantastic opportunity. Sedgwick had a lot to do with it, apparently. So, at the age of 22, the same age as the students we have in class, he goes on board that ship. And he's there for, well, what is it, for five years voyage around the globe. And when he was there, with essentially almost no formal training, okay, like our students, the ones whom I failed all this past week in their midterms, I only failed a few this time. I'll get them at the end of the term, don't worry. Society pays for kids who don't learn anything, right? They go get a job, they do a lousy job, and oil is not discovered, and mines are gold, and society pays for those things, that incompetence. Well, so what he did on this ship, of course, we know he studied the geology, he even had a plankton tow and nets strung out behind the Beagle to collect samples of animals in the sea, and he pickled them. He collected specimens on land, plants, fossils. He did observations on people and locals he met, like in Argentina, the gauchos. He was very impressed with the gauchos, the cowboys. He liked the fact that they were nice and they were loyal and they liked to drink lots of wine and everything. No, I don't think he knew much about that. And he also was very interested in coral reefs, and I'll show you in a minute that Lyell had a big influence on that. And then he collected tons of specimens, especially from Patagonia, the Galapagos Islands, as we all know. In fact, in some respects, the Patagonia part was equally as important as the Galapagos in terms of his scientific, how would you say, his kind of leap forward in terms of concepts and learning. Like he was learning at a rate that is almost astronomical. He made tons and tons of notes. Okay, he sent home his specimens. Okay, he boxed them up and sent them home. He sent tons of letters home to all sorts of experts. Imagine, me getting a letter from a 23-year-old person, who says, "Oh, hey, I found this funny-looking rock over here. Can you tell me what it is?" I get people coming in all the time with that. But imagine what most scientists nowadays would do if they got a letter like that. But Of course, this is 100, 200, 150 years ago. It was a different world. People in the business knew the Beagle was on its voyage. It was a very important trip, and Darwin was the young fellow who was offered this great opportunity. It's really astonishing, I think, this opportunity, and of course it went to the right person. And if you look at the book he wrote when he came back, I'll show you a picture of it in a minute, and you read his sort of notes from the whole thing. He was asking questions all the time. What is this? Why is that? How did that happen? And he was always asking questions. This is really the perfect science geek, always asking those questions. He started out on this trip essentially as an intelligent designer. Believe it or not, he thought that the animals and the fossils and the plants that he saw, that he collected, were placed there by God in the way they are. The fixity of species, that's what they are. They were put that way. And then he returned unconvinced, no longer believing that. But intelligent design, he wasn't a young earth creationist, of course, but he was, like most people in the UK at the time, he assumed intelligent design. So here are these famous drawings of the Beagle. Here's the Beagle in Sydney, Australia, on her way home. You can see from the people here that it's a very little boat. It was only 80 feet long. It was just a little thing. I never knew how he could put all his specimens in there until I read that he used to send them home, and they made it back. Here's a famous painting of the Beagle in Tierra del Fuego, okay, and you can see here, as you can imagine, in those days of the British Empire, showing the natives being completely astonished by this ship. Oh my God, wow, is Darwin on board? And here they're doing it again. They're standing here in wonderment at this ship. Robert Fitzroy comes in with sometimes some bad press. You know, people. I once mentioned that Darwin, in a first-year class, that Darwin was his companion. Was he gay? You know, no, it's not how. You know, the way the hierarchy in the ship worked, Fitzroy could not dine, of course, with the officers, yes, but it was such a small ship that he had hardly anybody. He needed at least one other person of the same social status in order to be able to function. So Fitzroy actually had a very illustrious career in the Royal Navy afterwards, and he became an admiral. And here's what he looks like in his admiral's uniform. So Fitzroy was, and Fitzroy, as you know, or you may remember from Dick last year, he was the one who actually also collected specimens, because he was a very smart man and interested in natural history, and he apparently helped Darwin's rather sloppy bird collection from the Galapagos by providing samples which were properly labeled and helped clear up some misconceptions.